Good afternoon. It is still about 8 till the top of the hour. Um, we're going to continue to wait for other participants who are still on their way in. We'll get started in about 7 minutes. All right, we are just about ready to get started, so make sure you grab your beverage of choice, and we'll kick this off here in about another minute. First, my dog has decided to bark all day today. It is the top of the hour. It is time to get started here, and to date myself a little bit, I am going to repeat what my brother first recorded on my family's answering machine a little while back. And I'm going to wish you good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in this wonderful world of ours. Hello. My name is Mary Hildinger, and I am a software consultant for DWD Technology Group. I am recognizing a handful of the names that are in attendance here today. I unfortunately have not had the privilege of meeting all of you here today, and that I can share some things with you that you may not have previously been aware. All right, this is the BusinessWorks year-end tips and tricks webinar for 2021. This is divided into two parts. The first part that we will cover here for the next hour is going to relate to those modules which are not payroll, short and sweet. That means general ledger, accounts payable, receivables, and inventory. Then the second half of the presentation, after a short intermission, will focus predominantly on the payroll module. So if you are not using BusinessWorks payroll module, you are welcome to leave the webinar at the end. Or if you want to stick around, feel free, and we'll just continue rolling. Okay, I'm not sure how many of you have had the privilege of attending a webinar, let alone one of the webinars that is offered by DWD. What we do with the large crowd is we typically do not open the microphones unless we've got a real specific question that we need some clarification on. So what I will ask you to do is we'll use the chat box. You may submit your questions via that, or you may submit via a questions box that's available. You may raise your hand. If you would all be so kind, let's please practice raising our hands. Go ahead and click on those. Cool, I've got some pretty good participation there. That is encouraging. And if we need to, we will open up the audio line and allow you to go ahead and speak. I will take questions throughout the session. I may not get to answer them immediately because I'm scanning 3 computer screens right at the moment, but I will catch up with them. The beautiful thing about the questions is that they are getting captured, and I'll have a chance to review them after the webinar. So if there's something I didn't answer right away, or I'm not able to answer off the cuff, I'll have a record of it, and I'll be able to get back with you after the webinar. As I mentioned, my name is Mary Hildinger. I have had the privilege of working for DWD for just over 25 years now. I have found a very enjoyable place to work. I have amazing coworkers, and I have even more phenomenal clients. And so I'm very privileged to be of service to you folks today and at all times. If any of you needs continuing education credits, CPE credits for your CPA license, please send an email to Leah Peters. Her email address is displayed there on the screen, and you can note that you need CPE credit for the BusinessWorks year-end webinar, and let her know whether you attended one half or both halves. On today's agenda, I've already kind of done the welcome thing. I would like to introduce DWD Technology Group to you, especially for those who are not familiar with us. We'll then jump into the core of the session, the first session here today, talking about history retention and how to make backups of your company. We'll talk about closing the modules. We'll talk about what goes on for year end for accounts payable, receivable, and general ledger. And then we'll open up for some questions and be able to take a short break for any of you who are sticking around for the payroll portion of today's session. So just a little bit about DWD Technology Group. We are a division of a full-service accounting firm in Northeast Indiana, Doolin Ward and Dewald CPAs. Our technology division was established a little over 30 years ago. We currently support 3 offices. We have our main office in Fort Wayne, Indiana. We have a smaller accounting office in a smaller town called Marion, Indiana, for those of you not familiar with the state of Indiana. And we have another software office in Indianapolis. The firm as a whole has approximately 60 to 65 employees, and about 25 of us are members of the technology group. We deal with software and business consulting, and our primary focuses happen to revolve around manufacturing, distribution, and general accounting expertise. Some other products that DWD works with include Sage 100. Some of you may be familiar with that. Back in the old days, this was called Mass 90 or Mass 200. We have a newer offering, which is a cloud-based solution called Sage Intacct. Obviously, today we're talking about BusinessWorks. We also work with Sage 50, which was formerly known as Peachtree. We do some not-for-profit accounting with a product called MIP Fund Accounting. We can also work with Sage Fixed Assets. So if you need to do depreciation schedules, we can help you set that up. Sage HRMS, that is a human resource management software system. We have consultants who can support that. And then we also have a contact resource management, Sage CRM, with which we work, and it can be very useful in tracking opportunities and prospective customers and things like that. So as you can see, DWD leans very heavily into the Sage family of products. We have a number of folks who have been working with predominantly Sage 100 and Sage BusinessWorks with upwards of 20 plus years experience in those products. Some of the things that we do from a services perspective on the software side, we offer training and support and setup. We can help you with your upgrades. We can do some custom report writing. One of the tools we use is called Crystal Reports. I have written a number of reports for BusinessWorks platforms before, so it's not out of the realm of possibility. We can often do data importing and exporting. We can help you with data maintenance, and we can help you integrate your systems potentially with other software systems. We also have hardware or network engineers, and we can work with various reporting tools, business intelligence, Power BI. We can also work with the details of production management, where we can get into scanning and efficiencies, warehouse automations. That leans itself more towards our Sage 100 product, but I have worked with some folks on some external applications that they integrate with their BusinessWorks. We have a team of network engineers as well. I didn't have the little bullet point especially, but we can offer services that include the assistance with data security. We have Cisco certified network engineers that can help you with making sure that your system is kept as clean as possible, and we can prevent the various gremlins who like to enter into our systems. We offer what's called managed services. So if you do not have an IT staff on site, we can help you facilitate those types of IT services. So with that, we're going to go ahead and launch into the software and talk about some things that might be helpful, I hope, for you as you consider, especially getting to the calendar year end, presuming many of you are on a calendar fiscal year. I am going to switch my screen view. I know the slides may or may not be real nice to read, but I'm going to go ahead and switch over to BusinessWorks. And we should be looking at the BusinessWorks desktop. BusinessWorks currently is version 2021, and the latest service pack is Service Pack 7 that came out just about a month ago. If you need help with getting those things installed, feel free to contact me if you don't have the resources to facilitate that yourselves. So when we talk about history retention, we can make note that our modules have varying degrees of history that we can keep, depending on what the module is and what kind of history that we want to maintain. So if I would go to the utilities menu of any of my modules, I can display that module's status. It could be display AP status, it could be display IC status or payroll status or what have you. And in here, we actually get to see those things which, excuse me, are set as far as the characteristics of the module. So in my company's case, I have a December fiscal year end. My company is currently in June of 2020. I have 100 GL accounts that have been created in my company, and I have 2 departments. I know what my retained earnings account is. And down here at the bottom, I can see for how long am I keeping my general ledger journal detail or my summary history. And this company currently is set up for 2 years. BusinessWorks allows up to 9 years maximum. So as a comparison here with regards to the general ledger, we might look at a source module such as AP. And when I look at the AP status, I'm going to see that I'm keeping 24 months of history, or 2 years. Sometimes the settings are in years, sometimes they are in months. And if I would like to change those settings, I would then go to the respective module, the utilities, and then I would go to the module parameters to make those changes. And for AP, I've got those accounts there, and I grabbed the wrong one in AP because that one's always my weird one. And that one actually, I accessed that one through cash management. My apologies. So cash management module is where I get to set the length of history because cash management and AP are what I call symbiotic modules. You really want cash management to ride alongside AP. It's pretty uncommon to have that module by itself. So whatever happens with the AP module also happens with the cash management module. So I can set that history, and I can go up to 60 months or 5 years of history with the accounts payable module. And similar with the accounts receivable module. When I look at the order entry module, because this module feeds off both accounts receivable and accounts payable, accounts receivable and inventory, we're going to see what the statuses are of those other modules and how they relate with the order entry module. So pretty much Accounts receivable, I keep 24 months of history. Inventory control, I'm keeping 12 months, but the 24 months is going to supersede. And we can see that all three of these modules typically play together. When we talk about doing data file maintenance and we do rebuilds, if you have to rebuild anything in order entry or inventory control, you actually have to rebuild everything. You have to start with accounts receivable and then go to inventory and then go to order entry. If you're not using the order entry or the inventory modules, then it's okay. You would just rebuild the accounts receivable files as they would be necessary. In thinking about the amount of history that we keep, sometimes too much of a good thing is not good. If we keep the full amount of history that's available and we don't have very good resources as far as computer speeds or network speeds, we can actually slow ourselves down pretty significantly. Pop back over to my other screen here. And if we set the retention too high, we could bog down our reporting, anything that it comes to doing with lookups. If I do have a lengthy retention history, then if I need to remove things, I can't until that history elapses. And so basically, as soon as I get to the period close where that farthest point out has elapsed, that's the time that those things can start being removed. I can't remove anything in that window between the current period and the length of the history that's out there. Customers and vendors, typically we cannot get rid of until we get rid of their history. Sometimes we can force it, but it is not always a successful force. And what we can do to help facilitate not having to keep an inordinate amount of history is we can actually create a copy of our company. And in doing that, there's a couple of ways that we can make that happen. I'm going to go ahead and bounce back over to my BusinessWorks here. I hope, are all familiar with the typical backup functionality in our BusinessWorks. This is where we want to make that periodic backup. Maybe we're getting ready to do a month-end close, or we're ready to save a copy just to have a snapshot of where we were at a particular point in time. That backup is fine. It just sits out there as a zip file that we would have to then subsequently restore when we need to access it again. An alternate way that we can make a copy of our company, and this one gets a little tricky because of the nature of it, but under our maintain companies function, we have to do this when nobody else is in the system, because this is what we call an exclusive option. So no other users are allowed in BusinessWorks. We can look for our company, and we can select that, and then we can create an immediate copy that effectively is a copy and a restore all in one step. The drawback to this is that once we have created that copy and we've given it a company ID, we can't copy over the top of that. So let me give you an example here. I want to create my 2021 backup. I can opt to copy my user security, or maybe I want to leave that only for an administrative user so that we can set up read-only privileges to keep people from creating transactions in the wrong copy of the data. And BusinessWorks is going to go running off to the races. It's going to make that backup, and then it's going to restore that backup, all really in one fell swoop. It's the combination of the file backup and the file restore without having to figure out where you saved that file. So now I have a new company listing here. And I can see my original sample company, and I can see my sample 2021 company. From there then, if I needed to make a new copy for some reason, if I wanted to recopy my original company and I tried to make that backup, I'm going to get barked at by BusinessWorks saying, you already have that name in use. You cannot reuse that name. The only way I could reuse that name would then be to delete that backup copy, the 2021 copy, and then create a new company in its stead. One of the things that I have found in the newer version of BusinessWorks here that I think is pretty wonderful, and it's pretty helpful, especially for those users who have a number of companies with which they work at any given time, is found under the company information. And again, this is applicable to BusinessWorks 2021 going forward. In our company information, we can actually pick a color scheme for our company code or our company ID. And you'll notice that I'm kind of in this pinkish gray color here. I get into the company information, I can pick off a different style, and I get a number of choices with which I can work. I will let you know that many of these choices are very dark. I'm not terribly fond of them, but some people may be okay with it. It is a company by company setting, not a user by user setting. So if I go back in, excuse me, and I have selected that dark, that's what my background looks like. That's what my frame looks like. If that is a comfortable view for you, that's perfectly fine. What this does for us then is that all of the screens that we open up would then fall under that particular color scheme, and it gives us the idea of which company we may be working in, especially if we are not paying attention to what is down in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. So some interesting things that have come along with 2021. I'm going to put this back to a color that I can read, and hopefully you all can read as well. Here we go. And I'm sure Sage will be updating their color schemes as they go along. Some other settings that we might want to consider with our company has to do with allowing posting into prior periods. This is a question that I get on a pretty regular basis. And so I have navigated to the utilities menu into what's called system preferences. And again, remember, this is a global setting for the company. Actually, yeah, that's a global setting for the company. So whether or not I want an international or a United States format, do I want the date and the time or one or the other on my reports? And here's the big question. Do you want to allow the prior month posting? If I say yes, basically I can post back into what even could be a potentially closed fiscal year. I can post back as far as the history would allow me. If I say no, then I am limited to the current open month. Or I can have a hybrid option here, which is the current fiscal year only, meaning that once I have finalized my GL for the end of my prior calendar year or my prior fiscal year, I can then preclude anybody from making any adjustments into that closed year. So that is an option that is available for folks if you're having problems with people posting things back into closed periods, or if they are not paying attention to their dates as they are working with them. We can help them out by keeping things at least limited to the current fiscal year, so we don't have any prior year adjustments that get made. So BusinessWorks, what is supported? What versions are available? Sage has adopted a policy pretty much that it will support the current version and the year prior version. They are constantly putting out updates. They are constantly upgrading the software. A long time ago, when I first started working with BusinessWorks, it might be a year or two before a version would come out. Now they're pretty good about getting a major version release out on an annual basis. And once they get past that 2-year prior version, Sage will not support you. Now, DWD will do our best to support you. However, if we run into issues where we can't figure it out, we know that Sage will not assist us because their first recommendation will be upgrade. And then once you upgrade, then we can look at it with you and figure out what's going on. So if you're keeping your maintenance current, your client care plan, you're basically having access to the software. It just really is getting it installed. I do have a question that was popped up here a moment ago. The question about Windows 11 support. At this time, we don't have an official word that it is a supported operating system. They will be testing it. As soon as they have concluded with their official test results, then we'll have official word on the compatibility. But in general, it will probably work. However, the caveat, if you do run into issues on Windows 11 and it's something maybe I can't help with, we may get the party line from Sage that says technically it's not supported yet. You might have to either roll back or find another solution. Or maybe they'll have the idea, or they'll have the information as to when they'll know that it will be supported or not. I would suspect that it would be supported. It might take a service pack on BusinessWorks if there are significant issues, but at this point, I have not heard of anybody having any issues running this on Windows 11. I mentioned keeping current on your Sage BusinessWorks client care plan, and a lot of people think that that is kind of a waste of money. I will share with you that that's a pretty inexpensive piece of insurance for you. Why should I upgrade? I don't want all the new bells and whistles and things. There's nothing wrong with my BusinessWorks. I mean, I've had people that stayed on the old BusinessWorks 12.9 for I can't tell you how long before they would upgrade into what is now, it used to be called BusinessWorks Gold, is now called Sage BusinessWorks. A lot of the issues are related to what Sage will support. And they just have to manage their resources, just like all of us have to manage our resources, that it's not feasible to maintain more than 2 versions concurrently. So if we run into a situation where we've got some data corruption, or we've got something where we need to have the data repaired by a Sage technician, and you're on a version older than the latest supported, they will require you to upgrade to a more current version. First of all, to see if that fixes the error, and then if it does not fix that error, then they will be able to go in and they can hands-on work on the problem. The problem with that, though, is that you folks may be out of touch with your accounting software for an undefined amount of time. So if you're keeping your client care plan up to date, it doesn't take a whole lot to get it updated. Where the hiccups come have to do with your operating systems of your computers. I am aware of people that are still running Windows XP. That was retired by Microsoft, I don't even remember how long ago. a number of years ago, but people are happy because it still works. I agree with that, but as soon as you have that power spike that blows your hard drive or blows your motherboard on your computer, you're going to be pretty hard pressed to find that replacement hardware or replacement software. So just, it's kind of my pitch, just to remind you that it really would behoove you to not only keep your version up to date, but also to keep your product service packs up to date. Those usually come out anywhere from 5 to 10 times a year between the versions. It just depends on what they are locating in the software that they want to enhance or maybe need to correct. So let's get to the heart of this here. What we need to do, what are we doing? It's the end of the year, it's the end of the period, excuse me. All of these particular tips and tools are not just limited to the year end necessarily. These are things that you would want to consider even on a monthly basis. So as we are all aware, excuse me, as we are all aware, the modules do need to close on a monthly basis. Now, what are some of the rules behind that? Well, the rules with the general ledger module is that it can be open. You can post up to 12 months in the future and as far back as your history is set to allow. However, accounts payable and accounts receivable, those modules are limited. You may only post in the current open month and in one future month plus up to 12 periods back. So you've got really a 13-month window that you can work in. You only have one forward-looking month that you can post transactions in, and you can only post transactions dated as far back as 12 months prior. So those things need to close on a regular basis for sure. Because inventory and order entry have a tight relationship with accounts receivable, we're going to really want to close all of them together. And we have ways of doing them module by module. We also have a utility that allows us to pick and choose the modules and close as a group. So under our utilities menu at the top of BusinessWorks, we can find the functionality called Company Close. Again, this is a function that requires exclusive access by the user for that company. So if you are running multiple companies and you have users in other companies, they can be working in their other companies. They just cannot be working in the company you are trying to close. That's the part of the exclusivity. The next question that we get after we select the company close and acknowledge the warning message is, do you want to make a backup of your company files? It is strongly recommended that you make that backup. And the reason for that is I have heard of situations, they don't happen very often, but it just happens to be the day that the lightning bolt hits and it knocks out your power. And you are in the middle of doing your close and your power goes out. That's pretty much an unrecoverable issue. It is not likely that your data will remain intact. If you've made that backup before you start the close process, we can recover that backup. You can go back in and try to reclose the backup copy. So when you get prompted and it recommends that you create that backup, I would suggest doing it. It will be safer in the long run. Once we've made our backup and we get back into the company close functionality, we can see the status of all of the modules, which we have activated. You may or may not have this same list depending on what modules you work with. You can see what your fiscal year end is, and then you can possibly see some warnings or messages related to the status of those modules where you are getting ready to close. The big one to point out here is the accounts receivable. And I know that I have not printed my statements for this period. So maybe that is something I need to do before I come back through and perform this close. But if I have already printed my statements and I'm good to go, I can mark off not only the accounts payable module. Accounts payable and cash management will close simultaneously, so you don't have to mark off cash management. But I can also close accounts receivable and inventory and order entry all at the same time. So technically, I can run all of them at once if it's appropriate, but if I need to hold back my GL or if I need to hold back payroll, I may do that until I am actually ready to physically close those modules. If I choose any one of receivables, inventory, or order entry, I must choose the other two. So it is not recommended. I can't remember if it barks at you or not, but you do not want to close order entry without either having already closed receivables and inventory prior to order entry, or you want to grab them all together and close them all together. Is that making sense so far for everybody? And I am accepting the questions in the chat box as you need to create them. So once I pick and choose the modules that I want to close, then I get the prompt for which month I am closing, and I just simply type in what it asks. And now BusinessWorks will go through and it will run through all the processes for all the different modules. And when it is done, I'll get the message that the company close has completed. And if I would go back into my company close, I would then see that receivables, inventory, order entry are now all in a different month. And I've got another question that just popped up. Another user out here suggests that he closes exactly in the order of AR, inventory, order entry, then accounts payable, then general ledger. And the closing the company through the method that I'm showing you here basically allows you to do all the modules in one fell swoop rather than having to go into each module's close folder on an individual basis. Excuse me. I'm just also pointing out that if I do have the combination of AR, inventory, and order entry, I want to make sure I either A, close them in that order, or I close them all together with the company close. So it's just an alternate way to get those modules closed at a given time. I do have a few folks who need to keep their general ledger open, or they choose to keep their general ledger open, and they don't necessarily close it at the same time as their other modules. It's all a preference on a company by company basis. And the recommended, I am going to talk about the recommended order of closing here, and it actually did get pointed out that it has to do with the modules that I had just recommended based on this other user. So if I go back to our presentation here and we talk about the order of closing the modules, If you're using Payroll, you probably are going to close it first because we need to be able to cut checks even as soon as the first of the next month, depending on what your pay cycle falls on. It is recommended that Payables gets closed next, and then AR, order entry, and inventory, and I have that a little backwards. It should be AR, inventory, and order entry in that order, or all together. If you're using the job cost, you can go ahead and close that module, and then the general ledger module. I do have a couple more questions that are popping in. Kind of going back to the history retention, I've got some folks who have just recently started using BusinessWorks, and technically the number of months, years to keep history basically starts at your first transactions. So whenever those first transactions were entered, and then as those periods start to close, then that's when the calendar for the details to start lopping off. So, with general ledger, we started putting transactions in at the first of the year, even though you're not necessarily putting activity, you weren't putting in detailed activity until later in the year. I think we kept the GL history a little bit longer, so I think we're keeping it for at least 5 years. So it's going to be a little while before we start to drop off some of that history. And that's kind of the beauty. We can pick and choose how much history we want to keep. It's a minimum of 2 years in the GL, but as many as 9. And maximums for accounts receivable and accounts payable is 60 months, so 5 years. Back to another question regarding the closing. The question is, if you don't close the general ledger, may you still proceed to use AP and AR? And the answer to that is absolutely, because we can post into the future, I believe it's 12 months for general ledger purposes, and then back whatever the history allows you. It might be it's a minimum of 20. It's a minimum of a 24-month window. It could even be longer, but generally, if you are rolling things forward, especially those source modules, there's no harm in rolling the GL together with it at that time, unless you're necessarily hitting your fiscal year end and you want to keep things open a little bit just in case you've got additional year-end adjustments. I've got another question. Printing the audit trail for the GL close. We do this through the journal reports, not through the company. What is the difference? There's no difference. It's the same report. It's just that we're choosing to run it at one time or another. Awesome questions. I appreciate these. Thank you. Okay, moving forward here a little bit. If we talk about the accounts payable module, what are some things that we should be considering? What are some things that is recommended that we do, especially when it comes to that calendar year end, at least in the United States? We obviously would like to reconcile all of our bank accounts. It would be ideal that we have entered all of the invoices that fall into that last fiscal period. And after all of those invoices have been entered, and ideally if it can be done before posting any future transactions, you would want to run your accounts payable aging report. That is going to be your cleanest reconciliation between your details of your vendor invoices and the general ledger at the closing of your fiscal year. It can be possible that if you are posting future transactions, especially if you are posting payments, you could cause some discrepancies in the aging report, and it might not tie back to your balance sheet. One way to get around that is potentially taking that year-end snapshot before you do your close. If you need to proceed with your data entry, you let your users proceed in the live company, and then you can use that backup as a basis of reconciliation to make sure that you have captured all the data for that final period. And then in December, you would want to consider running your 1099s. This year we have two different forms. This is actually a carry forward from last year as well. We have the old 1099 miscellaneous form, and we have the new but old 1099 NEC, non-employee compensation form. The IRS brought the NEC form back last year, and it replaces the actual box 7 from the 1099 miscellaneous form. And actually, forgive me, before I go too much further, I just caught a question regarding the aging reports. Why not run the aging as of the last day of the previous month? There's a small dissertation on that Sage has written up, and it does have to do with those future transactions. And we might be able to run it as of December 31st, as opposed to running it current. It has shown slight differences if there are future transactions that have been posted. So that's the recommendation, is to do it, run it as of current, and try not to have any of those future dated transactions if you can avoid it. Even if you take a snapshot of that report at the end of that month before you go into the next business day, which is in the next period, if you capture a copy of that, you still have a fighting chance to make sure that you're reconciling appropriately and still allowing your users to move forward. So hopefully that helps answer that question. I'm gonna blip back to the 1099s now, unless there are any other questions on the reports. Okay, back to the 1099 forms. So as we've discussed, the 1099 miscellaneous and the 1099 NEC. As far as the style of the forms, if you are not e-filing, in other words, if you are mailing in those forms, you must use the red pre-printed form. The 1099 miscellaneous is still the two-part form that you have been used to. This year, 2021, the non-employee compensation form, the NEC, is now a three-part form. So when you are hunting down those red copies, you will want to make sure that you are using the two-part for the miscellaneous and the three-part for the NEC forms. The recipient copies, those may be printed on the four-part perforated blank paper. And this is all presuming that you are running this from the Form 1099 reporting from BusinessWorks. And Atrix is the utility that handles all of this. And as long as you're using that, it will be compliant, because their goal is to remain compliant with all the changes in the form layouts, which also means that it may be a couple of days before they're ready with their most current updates. So as we take a quick peek at this, hop back over to my BusinessWorks. In our vendors, under AP vendors, we have our 1099 processing, and this walks us through which form style we are going to prepare. So I have to run my 1099 miscellaneous forms. That's going to be for rent. That is going to be for other income. That is going to be for payments to our attorneys. Or I can run my 1099 NEC. Those are my non-employee compensation. Typically, our non-incorporated entities. So if I'm a partnership or a limited liability company, I might, or an individual especially, I would probably need to prepare and send a 1099 NEC for those individuals. The 1099 form is applicable for those people who are receiving payments in the United States. So if we have anybody who is running BusinessWorks outside of the United States and you are making payments to those in-state entities, I am presuming you would have to file the 1099s with the IRS in the States. You might want to consult your accountants, your tax accountants on that. I am not well versed in international tax law. In fact, I'm not hardly versed in tax law at all. So just one thing that I've tried to avoid over time. So we can go ahead and process through here. This walks us through a wizard. It allows us to correct information and then print those forms. Or it gives us the opportunity to e-file if we would choose to do that instead. So that would be all the functionality we would want to consider for accounts payable. For accounts receivable, basically we want to make sure that we have all of our invoicing posted, whether it's accounts receivable invoicing or order entry invoicing. We would want to make sure that we have all our receipts posted from our customers. If we are applying finance charges, we would want to make sure that we run that process and then print the customer statements if that is something that we do. And again, similar to the accounts payable side, you really want to consider running your aging report before you start posting into the next period. It's going to give you a cleaner shot at a reconciliation. There won't be any potential dirt running around that might get in your way. And then we have our inventory management module. Again, prior to posting anything into the future, and if it's time to do your physical count, it would be most ideal to make sure that you get your physical count done so that your stock status report agrees with your balance sheet. And if you've never performed a physical count in BusinessWorks before, I will be happy to talk you through that process. But the short story to that at the moment is that you would first lock your inventory. There's a functionality where you basically disallow anybody to do any transactions. So this lock needs to happen. The counts need to be processed and updated and reconciled, and then your inventory would then need to be unlocked so that you can continue your day-to-day processing. Lock the inventory, enter the counts, get those updated, get the stock status report and tie it to your balance sheet, and then get that inventory unlocked. And then order entry, it's pretty much just close it. Once you have those other two modules, AR and inventory done, order entry really doesn't need much more than its calendar rolled forward. With regards to your general ledger, you probably want to make sure that all of your other modules, in fact, you should just make sure that all of your other modules that talk back to the general ledger have had all their activity posted and they have gone through their month-end process. In GL, if you're using recurring journals, you would want to print and post those, and you could then make any final general journal entries And once you have everything balanced out and reconciled, then it would be appropriate to go ahead and close the general ledger. Just as a reminder, once you have closed a module, you cannot reopen that period. So I know some people that are very diligent. It's the first of the month, boom, they've closed the module. I've got other folks that they may run a month behind, and that's okay too. It's whatever works for your business, just being aware of all of those things that can go on in the background. So once we've done all of our posting, what happens when we close the general ledger? Basically, BusinessWorks goes into the background and it clears out the profit and loss accounts and resets those balances to zero to open up the new fiscal year. And whatever that net income or loss is, that gets closed into the retained earnings account. Even though you can run the report looking forward, the actual data hasn't made the transition until you do that period end processing. And again, based on the number of years to retain that detailed transaction history or the summary history, beginning balances for the data files that hold those summary and detail balances, those get recalculated. So that's kind of what goes on in the background. It's all the magic that we just expect to appear, and the stuff that keeps the accountants happy, because then they know that their P&L for the next period starts out at zero, and there's month to date, year to date happen to be the same into that new year, and our retained earnings has been captured and has then modified the balance sheet. So I know that was a lot of stuff. I know I have techno-babbled here for quite a bit. We've had some wonderful questions here. As a reminder, we have recorded this session, or we are recording this session, and we will get you copies of the recordings after they have been transferred over to a usable format. At this point, does anybody have any additional questions that they would like to ask? Okay. This is effectively the conclusion of the first part of today's webinar. If you are not interested in sticking around for the payroll part of it, by all means, feel free to drop off. And if you need CPE, just send a request to, and I missed that. That should not have been Shannon. That should have been Leah. Let me get back to that email. There we go. Leah Peters, lpeters@dwdtechgroup.com. I apologize. I missed that on my edits. I did get another question that popped up here. If we use the company close to close all the modules at the same time, it will go in the appropriate order, but you could basically not close the GL at the same time that you're closing all the other modules concurrently, but it should go through the proper order based on the modules that are selected. It just tends to list the GL first because that's the core module that BusinessWorks is founded upon. And hopefully that made sense. Another question is, can I close payroll on the first and then not select it during the company close? Absolutely. So even though you're doing the company close, the modules that you pick and choose are what you want, as long as you adhere to the rule of AR, inventory, order entry, kind of always been going on at the same time. We've got some other really awesome questions here. Going back to the AP aging report and the balance sheet, if there's a difference due to putting in the future transactions, which report is more accurate, the AP aging or the balance sheet? Given the nature of how BusinessWorks posts, it posts the detail to effectively the source ledger and then the GL to the general ledger. I would suggest that the GL is probably going to be more accurate, but you can find using the aging reports or the detail reports, you can work yourself back to what the proper open AP is at the end of a given period. But I would be inclined to consider the balance sheet to be a little bit more accurate in this regard. And then I've got another question that is a little bit different here, but it has to do with the group reporting function. I have a minute or two here before I want to break for the payroll section. Can I get a quick raise of hands? How many of you use the group reporting function? How many of you are aware of it? Got a few folks that are using that. Basically, the group reporting is, let's get in here to the reports. Generally, what a report group does is it allows you to specify the criteria for multiple reports that you want to run at the same time. So I might set up a group ID, and I might call it month end. And then I can go through and I can pick basically any report from any module and ask that it be grouped together. And thank you for reminding me that you're not seeing my screen because I forgot to switch. My apologies. Let me go back and start that up again. If I go into, I can go into report groups off the utilities menu. I can go into a specific module, go into the reports, go into the report groups. It all leads back to the same place. And if I've got any report groups identified, I would get a list of those report groups. If I don't have any, it's going to let me create a new one. So basically, I can give it a title. I can then go through and on a module by module basis, I can pick off those reports that I want. So maybe I want to grab the AP aging report, and it's key that I give it a description because there are so many reports that are similarly named from module to module, and it wants us to go through a setup where we basically tell it what characteristics do we want that report to run. So I might be inclined to pick a date, or in this case, I probably would want to pick current. If I want summary versus detail aging, if I want to age by my invoice date or my due date, I can get all those things set up. And now I can add that report to my list. I can build this list of any modules report. And then when it is time to run them, I can still come back in here and I can either preview or print. And technically, all those reports should run concurrently. I am getting some messages from folks that they have had some slight issues with it. So I will just say caveat emptor. And if you are having problems with it, you're welcome to run them by me, or we can take them to Sage and have Sage figure out what's going on. When you are closing, and another really good question that got brought up, what does my posting date need to be when I do my period end closes? The posting date down here, I'm not sure if you all can see it, but it's basically my default module date or my default software date. And in general, it defaults to today unless I tell it something else. But if I am merely closing a module, it technically does not matter what that posting date is. Where that posting date is important is the transactions that you are entering for that period end. Okay. I hope that helps. I hope I have caught everyone's questions. If you still have questions, feel free to shoot them in the questions box. Feel free to stick around for the second part of the session. If you are not, like I said, if you're not interested in payroll, feel free to drop off, and we'll get you a copy of the recording after it gets prepared and is able to be sent out. I have, it just turned 6 after the hour. I would like to reconvene at 15 past. So feel free to get up, stretch, take a little meander about, and then come on back and join me for the latter part of today's session. All right, it's just about time to get started, so hopefully everybody is back at their seats. And with that, we'll go ahead and get started with the second part of this afternoon's webinar. It does not appear that anybody new has joined, so I'll get an opportunity to skip over some of the goodies that we talked about in the first half. Again, if you've got questions, and y'all have been amazing at sending those questions over, I thank you for those. Go ahead and continue to use that method, and if we need to, we will open up the lines again for audio if necessary. And again, if you need Cpe credit, you can either include it just requesting 2 hours in one email, or if you want to split it up and say, 1 hour for the general, 1 hour for the payroll side, feel free to contact Leah Peters, lpeters@dwdtechgroup.com. So we've brought everybody back. That is beautiful. I don't think I need to regurgitate who DWD is, so I will skip that part of it. That'll give us a little bit more time to take a look around at some of the things in payroll. Again, as a reminder, current year and one prior year version is supported. And we'll start talking about payroll. So it is strongly recommended that you make a backup prior to closing payroll. I know not everybody does, but if you do find that your network has some quirkiness to it, you might want to consider making that backup before you close that month, just so that we don't lose anything in translation. It's easier to restore a backup made right before the close process than it is to maybe go hunt one from your network backups. Just some points of note when we are closing payroll. Terminated employee history might be kept if you don't choose the option to delete them. This happens at the calendar year end. It does not matter whether you are on a fiscal year or not. This, because payroll is handled in the States on a calendar year basis, then terminated employees, you have that opportunity when you do your year-end close. And it's also recommended to make a copy of the company at the calendar year-end, even if you've made one for your fiscal year-end, either some months prior or you'll do that in a couple months. You probably want to have that just, again, as another safety net, to know that that is a snapshot of when you did your W-2s, or when you're going to do your W-2s. Atrix, that is the enhanced tax filing and reporting. One of the beauties with the newer versions since the onset of Atrix is that it does have the ability to read back into prior periods. Back in the day, that was not the case. You had to have that copy from which you would run your year-end payroll forms, because if you weren't getting those done before you ran your first payroll in the new year, you wouldn't be able to get to that information. So Atrix has kind of taken a little bit of the style cramp out of processing the year-end payroll forms. If you are going to be processing the enhanced tax reporting, you must have a copy of that installed on your workstation. This is a program that is workstation by workstation. It's not a general client access. And in order to run these, you do have to keep your BusinessWorks client care plan or your maintenance plan up to date. You would not be allowed to get those updates. What kind of tax forms? Well, we typically have our Form 940, our federal unemployment. We have our quarterly Form 941. That one is one that gets run regularly. Your W-2s. Then you might have a number of state forms that would be required. Since my focus is the state of Indiana, we have our state unemployment UC1 5A report, and that actually is required to be e-filed now. There is not an employee limit on that. The state wants that in an electronic form, and Atrix is responsible for providing that format to the state in the desired layout. So that does take a little bit of onus off us. If you want to report that manually, you can log into the state's unemployment website and you can key that information in on an employee by employee basis. As long as it's getting in there electronically, the state is pretty happy. W-2s. We used to have that evil red form that we would submit to the feds. They've actually lightened up on that requirement. They did so a number of years ago. We can actually print most of the W-2 parts on blank paper. It is recommended that you use the perforated 4-part and provide instructions to your employees. You can order that from Sage Software or any other office supply company. They should be able to get you that document layout. If you choose to e-file, or if you have a significant number of employees, especially depending on your state, you can e-file. Atrix will handle that, but they will charge you fees outside of the normal Sage maintenance fees that you're paying on an annual basis. As I mentioned, state forms, you may have a number of different ones that need to be either printed or e-filed. Indiana State Unemployment is required to be e-filed. You could e-file your WH-1. As I mentioned, the W-2s can print on the white paper. And just as a side note, in Indiana, if you were not aware of this, and I do not know the requirements for the other states, in Indiana, if you have 25 or more W-2s that you are filing, that does not mean current employees. That means how many people you paid over the course of that calendar year. You must e-file your state W-2s. And as I mentioned, consult with your accountants, your local accountants, if you have requirements, to find out if you've got requirements that might be different than that. When do the updates come down? For those of you who use this enhanced tax filing and reporting tool, you notice, especially at the end of the year, a lot of updates come. You might get in and work on some forms on one day, and then the next day you get back in and it sends you another update. I know that can be aggravating, but that is Atrix trying to keep current as quickly as possible with any last-minute changes that have been presented to them. And as you get in, and I'll actually go through a demo of this so you can get an idea of what this looks like. First of all, BusinessWorks will confirm whether or not your maintenance subscription is valid. So you will need to be on a computer that has an internet connection. If you do not have that, you probably will have difficulty running these forms, especially getting the downloads that might be required to give you the most current information. Secondly, once you pass the entitlement test, then you likely will get prompted with the update screen, and you can run the automatic update. You can download it and install it later. You could continue on the expired forms or cancel. I do not recommend any of the latter three options. I would say just go ahead and update it. If you have problems getting the updates downloaded, it might be some issues with your firewalls. You might have to consult your IT people, make sure that certain things are allowed through your internet options and your firewalls. And in a pinch, I believe we have a way where we can actually go and download that manually and go ahead and update that on the local computer that's going to be running those forms. And as a side note, I don't know if you folks are aware, but with a current maintenance plan, you can actually have users who are recognized as authorized contacts with Sage software, and that would allow for you access to their website, their knowledge base. That allows you to have access to the downloads, whether it's a version download or a service pack. And if you don't have your credentials, first of all, we have to make sure that you are identified as an authorized contact. We can help you with that. We do not have your usernames and passwords. I'll get a lot of people, I can't remember what it is. Can you tell me my password? And no, I'm terribly sorry. I don't have that information. But Sage can help you reset that. So what I would like to do is just spend a couple of minutes. We talked a little bit about just the process of closing the module. I want to get a little bit more into the actual form processing. And in Payroll here, we have the taxes menu, and our taxes menu has an option called the Enhanced Tax Reporting and E-Filing. This is your home away from home as far as processing your tax forms. And as I mentioned, this needs to be installed on any computer that is going to be running these forms. It will prompt you if it is not installed. It will allow you to download it and install it. And then, of course, anytime that we're running around in Payroll, if you've got deposit information that has not been completed yet, it's going to prompt you to remind you that you need to do a deposit for either your FICA or your federal tax withholding. Once we get into the actual form processing here, we can take a look at either federal forms, we can go to a specific state, or we can go back into history. My company is just California employees, so I'm going to focus more on the federal forms. And you might note here that these forms have a lot of different dates. And that just basically is an indicator that this has not been updated in a while to pull down the latest and greatest of the forms. So I'm going to go ahead and just try to process, first of all, a Form 941. And what I can do is I can identify what calendar year I'm working on, and I can identify which quarter. So if we're doing December year end, we're probably going to be doing the third quarter. My data is in the second quarter, so I'm going to go ahead and work with that. And it will go through and it will start reading your employee information and the taxes and wages that have been processed during that period. And again, because I haven't updated in quite some time, I am getting the prompt to do the automatic update. And if all goes well, then you should get the download. It will show you all the different things that it is updating. And it will offer all of the jurisdictions. In the old days, we used to be able to just select which jurisdiction that we want. They've kind of taken that out of our hands, which is actually probably a smart idea. And it's just going to update all forms for all jurisdictions. And we'll just let that thing go and do its process. If you're doing your updates a little bit more regularly, like every quarter, this won't take quite as long. Even the year end won't take that long. If you are a new install, it might take a little bit longer because it does need to go out and update from where you were to where we are now. Great time to go get a cup of coffee. I'm just going to mention, I'm really grateful my dog is upstairs and she's not bothering us this afternoon. I do apologize for her outburst earlier. We had a little discussion about that, but she did not remember. I do want to thank everybody for participating today and for being patient with me. And, I have got a question. What forms are we required to e-file as of January 1st, 2022? I am going to ask you to refer that question to your accountant, and it may differ by state. The federal forms, the Form 941 and the W-2s, if I recall, do need to be e-filed by January 31st. Back a few years ago, the e-filings did have a little bit more of a grace period, even compared to the paper filing. But I believe that everything is now required, with regards at least to the W-2s, by the 31st. 941s are required to be completed and submitted by the 31st of January. Your state tax forms would probably have a different date. I know in Indiana it depends on what your filing status is. Beyond that, I really cannot answer to any of the other states. So I can go ahead and I've got my download done, and now Atrix is getting the form ready for us here. And it walks us into a wizard. And this thing is really pretty amazing as far as what it allows you to do. It gives you a displayed form. It will give you an opportunity to fill things in. It is going to bribe you with advertisements. And it will prompt you if you need to fill out specific fields. It will mark those fields in red, and it will not allow you to continue until you complete the required information. So on this form, it's got help. So if I need to, I can hover over areas and get some additional help on what is required. I can see where something red is marked, so I know that I need to mark something down in this part of the form in order to make sure that it is complete. I can go back and review alternate pages, making sure anywhere that it is blue is an area that I am allowed to enter data. Anywhere that it is white is something that is calculated by Atrix with your BusinessWorks data. And those numbers wouldn't necessarily change unless we've changed something in the blue that has an effect on that calculation. And you just want to make sure that, especially whether you are a monthly depositor or a semi-weekly depositor, make sure you click the correct option here. The semi-weekly would be required to file Schedule B in addition to the other pages. And you'll see the page count increase up here. And you've got all of the different fields that need information. And the Schedule B for those semi-weeklies will basically have your liabilities as they occurred during the pay periods for that quarter. So all of your 941 information is based on the check date, and you've got the rules that you have to follow with regards to how many days after you have made your payment to your employees that you have to remit your payment to the IRS. And as you walk through, if you're missing anything, it does remind you that you need to go back. It will take you to the spot where you need to fill that information in. And if there are any calculations that need to be addressed, it will let you know. And then it will let you know if you have a balance due, or if you've got the, if you're going to be getting a refund, or if you've paid everything appropriately. And as you walk through, you've got your review edit section, and you can go back through here and you can change this as often as you want. When you get to the next step, which is the My Copy, then it will ask, are you sure? Do you really want to continue? Do you need to go back and double check it? Once you agree, you now are in a spot where you're basically only printing copies of the forms. If you need to go back in and edit, we basically have to start the tax reporting and e-filing function over again. And then, of course, once you get to the federal copy, again, they ply you with advertisements. And at this point, you get the opportunity to print or e-file. You can e-file a Form 941. There is a charge that is associated with it, or you can continue to print that copy and get that in the mail so that the IRS receives that by the end of January. Once you're done, then it will come back to the main screen, and you can go off to pick the next form. Let's go take a look at the W-2s. And again, don't be disheartened by the date here. Actually, if I want to fix that, I'm going to close that. I'm going to come back in. Once you've done the update, you don't have to do it all over again. Now you can see that my 941 is set as the 2021 version. You'll notice that the 940 is not yet 2021. That means I'm going to get another update pretty soon from Atrix that will tell me to get, that will get me the more current form. And I can go ahead and pick the W-2s. And it appears that the W-2s have not yet been updated, so we're probably still a week out. The Atrix usually gets its updates out about the third week of December for those specific forms. The 941 form hasn't really changed a whole lot, so it's not unlikely that that's already ready. And then as I go through the W-2 wizard, I can do test drives where it just basically will show me the ropes. I am going to be really honest, I hate the test drives because you might go through, you might find all the things that you need to correct, and then, oh, I got to go back through and I got to do it all over again. So I just go ahead and start processing because I can always start over. I can go in and start this up as many times as I want and correct it as many times as I need to in order to get it correct. As we walk through the W-2 wizard, it does ask us to confirm our federal ID number. If that's incorrect, we will want to fix that. Atrix does allow us to use multiple payroll data files for the same federal ID number. So if I was running 2 or 3 different BusinessWorks companies, but it was all under the same federal ID, I could combine all that information to process a single W-2 for each employee. I get an opportunity here to confirm my company information and my address information. And it does not like that, so it probably does not like the period at the end of division. Oh, it does not like that either. Oh, it wanted a numeric for that. That's interesting. Haven't seen that one before. Who are you? We're going to use this first option. I'm filing for my company, my employer. And at this point, we get greeted with the different taxing jurisdictions that might be active in our software. We can see, I'm going to use Indiana as the example. We would have our state and our state ID number, which is not our federal number. And then in Indiana, we go by counties for the local tax jurisdictions. We would need to have all of the appropriate counties set up for that. And if we get any messages from this, this one's telling me that the state of California has no W-2 requirements for what is called ETT, which is what this particular training tax is. Go ahead and skip through that. We get some questions here about anybody who is exempt, and you will have to answer yes or no. Do you have members, any employees who are clergy? Do you want to use control numbers? This is a throwback to the old days when we had to put a control number on there because we were filing those paper copies, and we can use either the employee ID or we can just use a numeric sequence for the control numbers. That was often helpful in sorting and organizing so that we could get the paper copies distributed appropriately and make sure that we had accounted for all the employees. Do you have anybody who wants to only receive their W-2 electronically? If we do use a control number on the W-2s, we can use a control number on the W-3, specify what kind of taxpayer you are, whether you're a 941 or a 943 or military. If you had third-party sick pay, we can include that. And if, heaven forbid, your business terminated this year, you can go ahead and mark that, and that will notify the IRS that you won't be reporting next year. And we also have to, if we haven't already, pick what kind of employer. The short answer is if you are a non-for-profit or a governmental entity, you would pick the appropriate. Otherwise, you are a none-apply. And I think for most of us who are here, the none-apply is the correct answer. How do you want to display the Social Security numbers? Do you want them truncated or blocked out with asterisks or X's? I recommend to my clients to go ahead and put the full social number on there, because if the employee gets his copy of his W-2 and all he sees is the last four digits, he may not know that he gave you a wrong digit or a wrong combination in the first five. And then we'll have problems with the IRS because they'll say, hey, there's an employee ID mismatch, and then that just opens up a big can of worms. So yes, it's a little scary throwing everybody's Social Security number out there, but it could save you some heartache down the road. And then it goes through and it offers up another type of a wizard that we will get to walk through. And this wizard is a little bit more descriptive than the 941. What we get over here on this left-hand side is a listing of all of the employees and all of their static information. So if you think about your W-2 and you think what is basically at the top, it's going to be your social, it's going to be your name, it's going to be your address, it's going to know whether or not you're what's considered a statutory employee, very few, whether or not you are eligible for the retirement plan, whether or not you have third-party sick pay. Then on the right-hand side of the grid, you notice that I'm just sliding the bar here to show the different pieces back and forth. I get all my wage information. This is all the data that is going into the various boxes. So I can see my box 1 wages, my social box 3, Medicare box 5. Then I can see my local wages, my state and my locals. And then I, just like I did previously, would start walking through, clicking on the next button. Next step or the next button, both of these are synonymous. And again, I'm just putting this back so I can see things evenly. I'm a Libra, so I like things as balanced as possible. Go ahead and hit next step. And as this data gets evaluated, if there are any inconsistencies or if there are any errors along the way, you will get a notification. And in this case, it is talking about the Medicare wages versus the Social Security wages, and those all must be of the appropriate amounts. Basically, because this is an older set of data and I've been playing around with it, I'm going to have some inconsistencies here. I get the opportunity to go back and correct it. If there really truly is a disparity here in the wages, I strongly encourage you to figure out what is incorrect. As you can see, I am able to edit the spreadsheet here, but if necessary, it might be more appropriate to go back and fix it properly if I can. It depends on whether you have already closed your payroll or not for the next year, and when you're attempting to do these W-2s. So lots of factors come into play where the best place is to make the adjustments to get you what you need. Once I've made a correction, I'll go ahead and continue again, and we'll see if anything comes up of it. I don't have any errors here in the state information, nor do I have any errors in the local. I do get a local wages found, but no state wages, basically because this guy has wages being reported in 2 states. So you might need to consult your accountant as to whether or not how you need to report that, is the short answer on that. You can continue, you might be able to continue without correcting. And then again, it's barking about the local wages without state wages. I'll just go ahead and continue, and now we are in the printing or e-filing aspect of it. I can do a complete e-file, have Atrix do everything for me. They will print the employees' copies and send them to the employees. They'll do the e-filing for the Fed and the state. Or I can do an a la carte selection. Maybe I'll print my own and I'll e-file my federal or state or both. You can see the pricing changes a little bit. There are minimums. If you don't have very many employees, it may not be economical to e-file it, or if you just want the headache of it to be out of your hands, the complete e-filing is kind of a nice option, and they give you the prices per employee. And then you are off to the races. You do need, if you choose to e-file, you will need to set up credentials with Atrix, and that in and of itself is its own registration. It is different than your Sage credentials if you have access to the Sage portal. But once you have that set up, you identify the jurisdictions in which you want to report or may want to e-file, and then Atrix will know based on your federal ID number whether or not you're able to e-file in those appropriate jurisdictions. So that's a really quick rundown on running W-2s for the year end and some of the other tax forms as they are available for the year end. Do you have any questions at this point? Is there something that you might want to see? We've got a few minutes left. Happy to take questions. I absolutely want to thank all of you for participating today. If you do have CPE requirements, you are welcome to contact Leah. Just another reminder here, just send that email and ask her to get you a CPE letter. And if you have any questions, you are welcome to reach out to me. I've got my email address there, and we've got the front desk phone number, either a toll-free number or the local number, and they can direct calls back to me, or you're welcome to just reach out to me directly via email. All right, if nobody has any questions, I will allow you back about 7 minutes of your afternoon. And again, I want to thank you all for being here today. I'll stick around if anybody wants to stick around with any questions. If not, we'll probably get this shut down here shortly. Thank you, folks.